2b. And we learned yesterday the three opinions, the three explanations of why the rabbis in the Mishnah hold that a sukkah that's above 20 amos is puzzle, it's invalid. 3 reasons: Rabbah, Reb Zera, Rava. And then the Gemara said that the different opinions of Rabbah, Reb Zera, and Rava, they specifically hold their view and they disagree with the other view. They are not just giving an optional explanation. They're really arguing with each other. And the reason why they argue with each other, the Gemara says, is because Rabbah's reason about knowledge of being inside a sukkah, that you need to know it, you need to see it, you need to realize that you're in a sukkah, and above 20 amos, you don't realize that. Your eyes don't dwell on the schach, on the roof, so you don't realize it. They say that pasuk is not referring to realizing and recognizing that you're in a sukkah. The pasuk is talking about future generations should remember, should recall the commemoration of Hashem's kindness in covering us with the clouds of glory. And that's what the pasuk is talking about. So it's not about you knowing that you're in a sukkah. It's about remembering something of the past. Now, so they don't agree with Rabbah. And Rabbah doesn't disagree with that idea. Rabbah also agrees that the simple meaning of the pasuk is talking about future generations, but he has a little hint in the pasuk that also causes him to say that you can learn 2 things out of this pasuk. Then the Gemara said that Reb Zera they don't want to agree with, because Reb Zera's pasuk is talking about the coming of Mashiach's days. In those days, that's when we're going to have a sukkah that's going to protect us. And so they don't want to, the other rabbis don't want to learn like Reb Zera, because that pasuk is not really talking about sukkahs. It's talking about the days of Mashiach. Now, what does Reb Zera do? So the Gemara asks this question. So what does Reb Zera do with that? Reb Zera also knows that the simple meaning of the pasuk is talking about in the days when Mashiach comes. It's a pasuk in Isaiah, and that whole chapter, a lot of psukim there that talk about what's going to happen when Mashiach comes, and it's going to be Hashem is going to protect all the righteous, and there's going to be great glory, and we'll be protected. Iyar tzemach Hashem l'tzvi u'lechavod. There's all the different psukim over there that all talk about this greatness that's going to happen to the Jewish people, and it mentions the word sukkah over there. So the Gemara says that Reb Zera also acknowledges that, except that he says there's the pasuk could have used the word chuppah, and it uses the word sukkah. And because the pasuk uses the word sukkah, it's teaching us that there's a special law about sukkah, that it is important to have tseil, which is shade from the sukkah, which means that the sukkah it's not just about giving shade up on top at 20 amos high, that at that height there is some shade, but actually has to be felt down below. There has to be some shade that you're benefiting, that you're having from the actual schach, from the roof of the sukkah, is causing there to be shade. So that's how he learns. And again, this goes along with the way we explained Reb Zera's lesson, his teaching, from a pasuk in Yeshaya, which is surprising because normally you don't learn words of Torah, halachas, from the books of the prophets. And here he's doing that, and the answer is because he's just translating a word, that it uses the word sukkah to teach us something about sale. That's seemingly the understanding of Reb Zera. And he's saying that he could have used the word chuppah there because the truth of the matter is there is the word chuppah mentioned in another verse right there. And so this sukkah could have simply used the word chuppah again, and instead it switched words to the word sukkah to teach you what the word sukkah really means. Yes, no.
The idea of shade, is that why you can't put a sukkah under a tree?
So we're going to see about that. It doesn't seem like that could be that there's much of a connection, because the point of the point is you need shade, and you're in a sukkah under a tree is that it's not kosher. So obviously, right? So there's a problem with a sukkah that's under a tree, but it's not because you have shade. It's because your shade is not a kosher shade. But we'll when we get to that.
Rabbi.
Yes, Moshe. Who I don't know who's speaking. Is that you,
Ezra.
Moshe? Ezra? Okay.
Yes. Yeah. Yesterday, someone mentioned Yonah.
Yeah.
And
Oh yeah. He sent a pasuk to me.
Right.
Yisrael. Yeah, he sent the actual verse. Very nice question. I didn't have a chance to see if any commentaries ask it. But it does say the word sukkah once or twice, and it emphasizes the concept of tzel over there. That's a good point, Yisrael. I don't know if you're behind this hidden screen, or you had to walk away. But anyway, thank you for sending that email.
You're welcome, man.
Ezra, did you look it up also? Is that?
Yeah. No, I have it in front of me. It says,
Oh.
"Vayetze Yonah min ha'ir, vayeshev mikedem la'ir, v'yas lo sham sukkah, vayeshev tachteha betzel ad asher ye'er ma yeh ba'ir."
I think it's a good question, right?
Yeah.
Looks surprising. Why did Reb Zera not choose the pasuk over there? And instead, he chose the pasuk in Yeshaya. And
Anyway, so
the only thing that comes to mind, maybe you could say that the story of about Yoina. So it mentions that a sukkah gives off tzel. That's what it does mention. But the pasuk in Yeshaya says the sukkah tihiyel tzel. It almost is giving us more like a rule about it. It's giving us a statement that a sukkah is as meant letzel yoima mechayev, that it has to. In other words, it could be that the pasuk in Yeshaya is a little more more of a teaching, more of a lesson, more educational, and seemingly, it's because you could possibly translate the pasuk in Yaina to say that sukkah gave off tzel, but does that mean that all sukkahs are meant for tzel? Here in the pasuk in Yeshaya, it emphasizes a sukkah should be for tzel, like almost like that's what the meaning, the concept of a sukkah is. So it could be you could maybe push it off like that. I don't see any discussion in the commentaries about it. I'm just giving you my own little thought why he chose that pasuk. The commentaries here, I'm just looking in the back over here. I don't see them bringing any pasuk from Yeshaya at my first glance here. I don't from Yona. Just glancing over here, I don't see anything. But maybe I'll try to look it up a little more and see if anyone else says anything. Okay. Anyway, definitely a good question. Okay, so we are holding. We're holding by the final answer, Karava Nami Layomi. Why do they not want to explain the Gemara like Rava? Why, in other words, the Mishnah? Why don't the other rabbis, Rabbah and Reb Zera, why don't they like Rava's explanation? So let's look at this inside. Karava. We are 5 lines from the top of the page on 2b. It's probably 2b1 in the art scroll. Robert, you can tell me if I'm
Which
correct.
one is it?
I believe it's 2b1. I don't have an art scroll in front of me, but we're at the 5th line in the Gemara. It's kirava nami loy amri. Kirava.
I'm trying to find that. It's a Rabba Zare. Yeah, it's on the bottom, on the left-hand side, the last paragraph. The Gemara turns to the third and final opinion. Is that what you're referencing?
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Yes, kirava nami
Yeah.
loy amri. That the
So do you want me
other
to read that? Is that what you want me to do? Or
no, I just want you to confirm that it's 2b1.
yeah, it's
Okay.
2b1. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So Karavanami Layamri, the other rabbis do not want to explain the Mishnah that you're not allowed to have a sukkah more than 20 amas high. They don't want to explain the reason for it like Rava. So Rava has his reason, but the other rabbis want to give their own reasons. They don't want to follow Rava's reason. Mishum, because of Kushya de Abaye, because of Abaye's question. Abaye's question was that what happens if you make a sukkah out of iron? Will that also not be a kosher sukkah because it's a sukkah that's permanent? Of course, a sukkah made out of iron is also a kosher sukkah. And Rava did have an answer for that question, but it seems that the rabbis did not like his answer. The answer that Rava gave was that when you build a sukkah out of iron, it's still the size of a temporary sukkah. When you build a sukkah above 20 amos, then this is the size of a permanent sukkah, and therefore a permanent a sukkah the size of permanence is a problem. The sukkah the size of a that's a temporary size is kosher, and that's really what the obligation is. That's the way Rava is understanding it. Now, Rashi says it a little differently than I just explained it. The way I explained it is a little more simpler. The words Rashi uses, interestingly enough, is he says included in some, when you have a sukkah that's up to 20 amos and a person makes a dwelling up to 20 amos as a temporary dwelling. So even if you made it permanent, it's going to be kosher because part of being permanent, included in a permanent wall, is a temporary wall. So you did it okay because you made it temporary plus. So in other words, every sukkah that's permanent is temporary sukkah plus more, plus stronger. And so you made it permanent. But that doesn't minimize the fact that it's also considered a temporary sukkah. It has a temporary size to it. It's under 20 amos, and you made it a little stronger.
Rabbi,
So there's no problem with that. But if you make it more than 20 amos, then then it's considered a permanent. You built it in a way that it needs to be permanent, and you built it in a way that the size is a permanent size. Yes, David.
yeah, where I have Karaba Nami La Amri Mishum Kasha Dabaya. Rabbi Steinsaltz fills in the blanks. What's the problem? He says with Abaya regarding his sukkah with steel partitions.
Right. I said iron, but yeah.
No, but I'm saying that I thought you're saying that the problem is the size, and he says the problem is the iron partitions.
Oh, yeah, but we're both saying the same thing. Basically, the question was that if you're saying that it can't be the reason for 20 amas high, it's not a kosher sukkah, it's because it's permanent, then if you made the sukkah out of iron, it would also be considered permanent, right?
Yeah,
Also,
okay.
even though it's lower than 20 amis. That's the question of Abaye. And what was the answer? The answer to that was that it's all about the size of permanent size. It's not about if you made it out of material is permanent. It's about the size of it. If the size is permanent, then that was his answer. Now, the other rabbis don't like the answer, but that's the answer that Rava gives. So Rava has an answer how he explains it, but the other rabbis didn't like that. They said, according to you, the sukkah that's made out of iron should not be a kosher sukkah. Okay, so we are now holding at the next the dot in the Gemara, Keman Oslo. Who does it go like? So the Gemara now is going to bring some interesting qualifications to the Mishnah. The Mishnah says there's an argument if you make the sukkah too high. The rabbis' first opinion in the Mishnah, which we often call the rabbis, it doesn't give a name who it is, and we just call him the Tanakama, the first opinion. Generally is a few rabbis maybe hold that opinion, but there's an opinion that says it's puzzle invalid if it's too high. Rabbi Yehuda says it's kosher. And the Gemara is going to say that that whole debate only applies in certain cases. But in other cases, everyone would agree. Let's see the specifics. So the Gemara says, Kaman Oslo, who does it go like the following statement? Hada Amar Rabbi Yoshia, this that Rabbi Yoshia said, Amar Rav in the name of Rav. Machloikis, the argument in the Mishnah between the first opinion and Rabbi Yehuda about a 20 amos high, above 20, a sukkah that's above 20 amos. This debate, b'she'ein defanois magiyos l'schach. This whole debate is if you don't, the walls do not reach the schach. They don't reach up all the way to the top. But if the walls reach up to the top, to the roof, even if it's above 20 amos, it is kosher. What this means is that we just gave a whole bunch of reasons. We gave 3 reasons why a sukkah would not be kosher after it's too high. Now the Gemara says, guess what? It's kosher, even if it's that high. What do you mean? We have 3 reasons. Yeah. But those reasons, one of them, at least according to one opinion, for sure, according to one opinion, maybe that only applies if your walls don't reach the schach. If your walls reach the schach, then you can have a high sukkah. You're allowed to have a very high sukkah if your walls are reached the schach. Now, what does this mean? So people that don't live in Florida are not so familiar with this, especially if you live in New York. You've never heard of such a thing, that walls don't reach the schach. They don't reach the roof. Because outside of Florida and outside of hot climates, people are very, in fact, I remember in Rhode Island, we used to bring a blanket to the sukkah. It sometimes snowed during sukkahs. It was very cold. And, so when you build your sukkah, you not only do you insulate it, you have walls, solid walls, you might even consider bringing a heater inside. But here in Florida, where it's the hot climate, so the you don't want it to be too humid and too hot. So you want more wind, and therefore you only a lot of people they only build a half a sukkah. They build the bottom half, and they just have a skeleton for the to hold up the schach. They just have like some a few beams that'll hold up the schach, but basically the bottom half is what's a solid sukkah. And even that is not always solid. Even that is sometimes just lattice or something. But the lattice doesn't have to go all the way up to the schach. The lattice could be, I know the lattice is sold by 4 by 8s, 4 feet by 8 feet. And you don't have to put it 8 feet high. You could put it 4 feet high and just put it the long way. You get 8 feet out of the lattice, and you have your sukkah pretty well. In the corner beams are what holds up the schach. And so, is that kosher sukkah? Yes. Why is it a kosher sukkah? So we're going to learn a little later that there's something called good asik. Good asik means the wall halachically can be extended. That if you have a 10 tfachim wall, 10 tfachim means 10 handbreadths wall, that 10 handbreadths wall can be extended to the roof. That as long as your sukkah is 10, how much is 10 handbreadths? According to one opinion, it's around 31 inches or whatever. According to another opinion, maybe 36 inches, 40 inches, but once it's somewhere between 30 and 40 inches is a 10 tfachim, is these 10 handbreadths. Once you have that, you basically have a wall around your sukkah. And even if your walls don't reach the schach, it's still kosher as long as your schach covers over the whole area. So we consider it, even though you don't see a wall there, but halachically there is a wall. That wall is extended all the way up to the schach. Now, that law that your wall fits all the way up to the schach, our Gemara just says here that, at least according to this opinion, if your schach is more than 20 amis high, it could be a major problem because the Tanakama in our Mishnah, the first opinion in our Mishnah says it's puzzle. And the other opinion, Rabbi Yehuda says it's kosher. However, if you build your schach with lattice going all the way up to the top, 20 amis high, more than 20 amis high, you have it all the way up to the top, then it actually would be a kosher sukkah according to everyone. But the problem is, why was it non-kosher if you don't have the wall? And why now is it going to be kosher? What would the reason be? We gave 3 reasons why a sukkah the schach is too high, it's not going to be kosher. We give 3 reasons. Now we have to go through each of those reasons and see would any of those reasons work to explain that if you had walls, it actually is kosher. It's only when you don't have walls all the way going up, that's when it's a problem. But if you have walls going, so we have to go through each reason. So one of the reasons was about permanence, right? That you have a sukkah that's over 20 amas high, it's got to be a solid, it needs to be a permanent thing, dwelling, and a sukkah is meant to be a temporary dwelling. So would that make a difference if you have walls that go up to the top or not, where the walls don't reach the top? Either way, if the top is above 20 amas, it's going to be considered like a permanent dwelling. So that reason doesn't seem to make a difference if you have walls that reach the schach or walls that don't reach the schach. What about the other reason about shade? The shade of the schach, the schach needs to give off shade. We said when it's so high up, it's not really giving shade down below. The walls maybe are giving shade, but the schach is not getting much. There's not much shade that you're feeling from the schach, from the roof. Even if you take off the schach, probably you wouldn't have much shade over there because the shade is not blocking the sun really. It's so high up. So the thing is, it's like imagine putting an umbrella. You want an umbrella from rain. Imagine if you put your umbrella 20 feet high and you hold your umbrella, you have a long pole and you have an umbrella 20 feet high. Are you getting shade from the rain? You're not getting any shade from the rain, right? So the same thing as the schach. It's so high up, you're not getting any shade. Okay, so what about if you have walls going all the way up? If walls going all the way up, would that help you get shade from the schach? No. So it doesn't seem like it should make a difference if you have walls going all the way up or walls that are only halfway up or a quarter of the way up. It doesn't seem like that will make a difference with regard to getting shade from the schach. So what about the other reason? And the other reason was that you don't see the schach when it's so high up because you don't look, your eyes don't dwell on it. What about if you have a wall that goes all the way up to the schach? If you have a wall that goes all the way up to the schach, maybe then you look at the wall, naturally you're going to see that there's schach on top. Because you'll look at it. It'll be a cause for you to look because the schach reaches, because the schach, the walls reach the schach, maybe then you'll actually look and you'll see that you're in a sukkah. If the walls don't reach the schach, so you look at the walls around you, and that's it. They end at 10 tfachim, let's say. They end at 40 inches, 30 inches, 31, 32 inches. You finish, you see that. That's the walls, and that's it. You're not bending all the way up to look up. But if the walls reach the schach, so you take a glance at your walls, and you end up seeing, there's actually some bamboo on top, or there's some type of evergreen on top, and there's palm branches on top. So you actually see the schach. So then everyone agrees that it'll be a kosher sukkah. So now we figured out what we've just done is use the process of elimination and figured out that from all of those three explanations, one of them actually fits with this view. Now let's read it inside, and you'll see how this works. Kaman Ozla, who does it go like? Hada Amar Rab Yoshia Amar Rav. This that Rab Yoshia says in the name of Rav. Machloikes b'she'ein defanis magius l'schach, that the whole debate in our Mishnah is when the walls do not reach the roof of the sukkah. But if the walls reach the roof of the sukkah, even if the roof of the sukkah is higher than 20 ames high, kishera, it will be kosher. Even the rabbis will agree. Even the first opinion in the Mishnah will agree, as long as you have walls that go all the way up to the top. So the Gemara says, you know who that will fit like? Kaman Karabba. That fits with the reasoning of Rabbah. Rabbah gave the Amr Mishum Delay Shalta Ba'ina, because Rabbah said the reason why over 20 ames is normally invalid because you don't see the schach. But since your walls reach to the walls reach all the way up to the schach, mishlat shalta ba'ena, your eyes will dwell upon it, and therefore it will be considered a kosher sukkah. So that is the opinion of the qualification, I should say, of Rabbi Yoshia Amarav, and that seems to fit with. Now, I do want to mention that according to that, it comes out that how many walls need to be all the way up to the schach?
According to this opinion, all of them.
So not necessarily, because first of all, a sukkah doesn't really need 4 walls. A sukkah needs 2 walls plus a little more. So you're not going to have all the walls reaching the schach. And the thing is that as long as you have 1 wall maybe reaching the schach, maybe that could be good enough. Because since you look around and you see the walls, in other words, according to this understanding, at least there's a way of understanding it this way. I'm not saying that you can't look at it differently, but there is a way of understanding this, that people look around where they are. They look around their surroundings. They see a wall. And generally, you look to where the boundaries of the wall reach. That's pretty much what you do. But people look at their ceilings? Not really. But you look at the wall, you end up seeing a little of your ceiling because your wall reaches your ceiling, you see your ceiling. But people look around and they see they see what's around them. So if people see the wall around them, as long as they see 1 wall, they're going to see that it reaches to the schach. And they're going to see that they're in schach. So seemingly 1 wall should be good enough according to this logic. At least one of the commentaries seems to say that. So
Can I bring a copy too?
I'm good.
So one of the commentaries mentions this. I just thought I'd mention it because seemingly it could be, it comes out, if you want to go down to the specifics over here, it seems like 1 wall reaches the schach should be good enough. Now, the funny thing is the wording is ein defanois magiois l'schach. It uses the plural about the walls, which maybe you could say it sounds like maybe this thought is doesn't work. It doesn't fit with the Gemara, except that the answer to that probably is that the common way to do it is you're not going to have 1 wall reaches the schach, 1 wall doesn't reach the schach, the other wall reaches 3/4 of the way to the schach. It would look a little weird. So the Gemara is just giving the cases where, either your walls reach the schach or they don't. But according to the letter of the law, seemingly 1 wall could be good enough. According to this reasoning, that could be okay. So again, it depends how you're understanding. Another way of looking at it, and I didn't see anyone say this, but the other way of looking at it maybe is that you would hold that you need all 4 walls reaching the schach, because since we need you to see the schach, and the schach is so high above you, and you might be sitting in one direction, so maybe you could say you really need all 4 walls to reach the schach in order to hope that you'll actually see the schach. Maybe you could say you need all 4 walls. that this is not good enough for a 3-wall sukkah, except that he doesn't really say anything changing the rules of sukkah. He just seems to say that your walls reach the schach. So seemingly, seemingly this pshat is logical to say that that as long as, according to Rabba's reason about need to see the schach and know that you're dwelling in a sukkah, so seemingly if one wall was up all the way reaching the schach, that should be good enough. Now,
Rabbi, wouldn't it have said, what, if he meant just only one wall is necessary to reach the schach, he would have said dofen echad. And instead, he said defanot. So he's saying all of them must reach this.
Right. I just asked that question, and my answer was that if the terminology that he uses is seemingly not the halacha element of it, or just the practical element of it. That it's practically if you're going to do one wall to the schach, you're going to do all your walls to the schach. It wouldn't look so respectful to have one wall to the schach, one wall here, there. Seemingly, look better symmetrically and to the eye if you do. So, in other words, the practical side of it is if your walls reach the schach or your walls don't reach the schach. But if according to the letter of the law, following this way of understanding, seemingly one wall reaching the schach should be good enough.
But when you have good achas, you don't need to have any of the walls reaching the schach.
Yeah.
Once you have it 10 tefachim, it goes up by itself.
Yeah, except that if your schach is over 20 amos, then you need the schach, you need the walls to be magios l'schach according to Rabbah and make it kosher, and then it'll make it kosher according to Rabbah. And now there is another interesting thing. Well, according to Rabbah, the problem is people don't really look up. What happens if I have a very wide sukkah? If you have a very wide sukkah, long and wide sukkah, so maybe then you would be able to say, I see the schach, because people don't move their head, what would that be, 90 degrees to look straight up. But if you're looking straight across and you have a very wide and long sukkah, so maybe there's room to say that you see the schach if it's a very big sukkah. Imagine you have 100 feet by 100 feet sukkah. You're having, 1,000 people in your sukkah. So, you have a nice big sukkah. So in such a case, maybe even if it's 30 feet high, 50 feet high, maybe you'll see the schach if it's very wide. And according to that, maybe Rabbah would agree also with such a sukkah, that if it's very, very wide, maybe it would be a kosher sukkah. And there's room to say that. There's a little hint in Rashi that maybe such a sukkah could be kosher also according to Rabbah. Again, Rabbah's whole point is that you need to be able to see the schach, and a very tall sukkah, you don't see the schach, but the normal case of a very tall sukkah, he's right. You don't normally see the schach. But maybe if you had a very wide and long sukkah, maybe then you would actually see the schach. So there is room to say such a thing, that it's possible to that such a sukkah, if it's extremely wide and long, maybe also that would also be a case. Again, we gave a case that Rabbah would allow, that Rabbah would say, it's very high up, no problem. What was the case? If the walls reach the schach. So I'm just mentioning there's another possibility, and that would be if it's a very wide and long sukkah, where you might also be able to see the schach because of the width and length, the very, very wideness of the sukkah. Our Gemara is about to say a case where it's dalid amos on dalid amos, where it's a sukkah that's 4 amos on 4 amos. Now that is not really making much of a difference. But if it's 100 amos, or by 100, maybe then there might be room to say that Rabbah would agree. But we'll soon see what the law is with a dalid amos al dalid amos sukkah. We're just about to see. Yes, Moshe.
Are we supposed to look for the security of the schach, or for since it's got to be more shade than sunlight, are we looking for the sukkah to be a source of, like you say, for a breeze, for air? If the person going into a sukkah for the purpose of looking for the security of the sukkah, or more for maybe a breeze to come through, like you say down here in Florida, I'm just curious.
Yeah, so the point really is shade from the sun, not the breeze. It's the shade from the sun. Of course, it's nice to have a breeze. We in Florida would love to have a breeze, but the main thing of the sukkah is the schach, which protects us from the sun.
So they're looking for the attachment from the walls to the schach. People will be looking for that for the protection from the sun. In other words.
Well, there's two things. Number one is what the sukkah needs to be, and number two is what people look at. The sukkah needs to have more shade than sunlight, right? So that's not what it needs to have. Now, the people look and see that they're inside a sukkah. So that you need to have the schach not higher than 20 amos. Because if the schach is higher than 20 amos, you don't know that you're dwelling in a sukkah. According to Rabbah, that's the reason why it has to be that size. So you need to know that. So again, it's two separate points. One is about having shade, that you need to have shade. Number two is, do you know that you're in a sukkah?
Do the walls have to be attached to the schach, literally, or does the schach can hang over on the wall so that it appears that there's
it doesn't have to be attached. It doesn't have to be attached to the schach. It has to be up all the way up to the schach, and basically reach the schach, or at least be within 9 inches from the schach, because there is a law of lava that gives you a little leeway. Yes, David.
What if the sukkah is so large you can see the schach, but you can't see the walls?
Why don't you stand on your head and
yeah, I'm not sure that there's any problem with that. In other words, as long as you see that you're in a sukkah that's covered by shade, seemingly that's what the pasuk is getting at. That I commanded you to dwell in a sukkah. So as long as you could, at least the way he's explaining it is, you need to be able to see the schach. So if you want to tell me what happens if you're sitting in the middle of a sukkah that's huge, and you're going to tell me I don't see any of the walls, but I can see the schach, we don't know anywhere that says that sukkah is not kosher. In fact, there is a statement somewhere in the Gemara here where it says, "Re'uyim kol Yisrael leishev b'sukkah achas." All of the Jewish people are eligible to dwell in one sukkah, which would mean that you should be able to have a kosher sukkah that's 100 miles by 100 miles, and it's still kosher, even though you probably won't see the walls, but nevertheless all the Yidden would be able to dwell in such a sukkah. So seemingly that the obligation is to be able to see the schach, according to Rabbah, not necessarily to see the walls.
Yeah, because I'm thinking, like, when I was on kibbutz in Israel years ago, we worked in this. We did different shifts in different places, and one of the places was a potato factory, and it was outside, but the walls were so far away you couldn't even see the walls unless you were sitting next to one of the walls. But when in the middle, if you were in the middle there, you really didn't see the walls. You didn't know if you were outside or inside or what.
Right. Well, when it rains, you're in the sukkah.
I think the emphasis on being able to see the schach makes sense because the schach is supposed to remind us of the anene hakavod, right?
Right. So, it makes sense.
By that definition, then then the walls are a necessary entity, but they're not the primary focus.
Right, right. Definitely, the main thing is the schach. But there are a lot of laws about the walls of the sukkah, and a sukkah does need to have walls as well. So, Yisrael, you can't totally disregard the walls. There's rules about the walls as well. In other words, you can't just put four, put 4 poles up and put schach on top. You do need to have walls. As we explained, you need to at least have 10 tfachim of walls, right?
I wasn't suggesting that the walls
have no
have
halachic. No, they have a.
But I guess my point is the focus, no pun intended, the focus is on the anene hakavod, which is represented by the schach. I'm not diminishing the need for walls.
Right. However, I guess it deserves to be looked into. The anane hakavod surrounded us from all sides. So in the sukkah, the roof, of course, is the most important. That's why it's called a sukkah. But is there any are the walls symbolic of the surrounding clouds as well? Is it only the schach that reminds us of all of the clouds, or is the schach the main remembrance, but the walls maybe are symbolic of the other clouds that surrounded us? I think it's something to consider.
Well, my thought is that halakha spends puts a lot of attention on what constitutes valid schach, but
right.
it doesn't have similar emphasis on what material the walls are made of.
True. It does, but it does need to have walls. And do those walls, together with the schach, do they create? In other words, the walls on their own, you're right, would not make us think that we're in a sukkah. But together with the schach, having to have walls, maybe there is an element of the walls are joined by the schach to ultimately give us that whole feel that we're dwelling inside this. The anane kavod, the clouds of glory, especially because the size of the walls are temporary walls, even if they're made out of solid, even if they're made out of a solid material. But I think Jeffrey wants to say something. Yes, Jeffrey.
We shouldn't forget that the rule is that you build a sukkah so that you can live in it. So if you live in it, and if you live in a warm climate, you can even sleep in the sukkah, and you can experience all your activities in the sukkah. And so there's many reasons why the ideal sukkah in your mind is one that has 4 walls and that has the appropriate schach and does the appropriate decorations, whatever, for the special holiday, and not just an ethereal idea of protection of the anei hakavod.
But I mean, the fact is that the schach needs to be, at least the way we explained it yesterday, was that the schach definitely needs to be a temporary schach. That the rain, according to Taisus, the rain has to be able to fall through. So there is definitely an element of
absolutely. And if we read Nehemiah, they built the whole sukkah out of the same kind of materials from the leftovers of the agriculture.
Right. Okay, very good. So now we're going to jump to the next statement of the Gemara. So again, we're on 2b. And we're at the next paragraph here, where it says, Kaman Ozla, Had Amar Rav Huna, Amar Rav. So the earlier statement was Rav Yoshia in the name of Rav, and this statement is Rav Huna in the name of Rav. Who does the following statement follow? Again, we have 3 reasons why a sukkah is invalid if it's above 20 amos. And now we're going to qualify that and say, well, if it's this way, it's going to be valid. And we gave reasons why it's invalid. And one of those reasons we're going to try to fit with this qualification and say, wow, the reason why it was invalid was because of such and such. And if you make it in this way, then that reason doesn't apply, and therefore it will be valid. Even though it's over 20 amos, it's still going to be valid. So what is the statement of Rav Huna Amar Rav? That machloikis is b'she'ein ba ela arba misal arba. The whole debate in our Mishnah between the first opinion and Rabbi Yehuda about a sukkah that's above 20 amos is when it does not have 4 amos by 4 amos, which would be like either 6 by 6 or 8 by 8, 6 feet by 6 feet or 8 feet by 8 feet sukkah. That type of sukkah is, if it doesn't have that size, then you have a debate if it's too tall. But if it has, so in other words, the argument, let me just read it one more time. The machloikis is b'she'ein ba ela arba misal arba. The whole debate is only if it has 6 feet by 6 feet or 8 feet by 8 feet. That's when there's a machloikis. But if it's bigger than that, if it's beyond the normal size, that's like a normal size sukkah. You know, almost like when you go to a Home Depot, you buy an 8-footer, a 2 by 4 or an 8-footer, right? That's like the typical size of a 2 by 4. That's the 8 feet by 8 feet sukkah. So you build, you don't have to cut the wood. Well, you build the standard size. That's a standard size sukkah. It's called dalet amos on dalet amos, which comes out to be around 8 feet by 8 feet. So that would be the machlokes. That's where there's a debate in the Mishnah on the normal case where you have a sukkah that's 4 amos by 4 amos. But if it has more than that, so you made a bigger sukkah beyond the norm, so then you can even make it bigger than 20 amos high. Who would this go like? So in other words, where is the cutoff point? Dalet amos by dalet amos, which we can just give a rough number as 8 feet by 8 feet. You do it a little more, you do 9 feet by 9 feet, 50-foot high sukkah is kosher, according to everyone. Why would that be? What was the reason before why we said it's invalid? What was the reason we said it's invalid? That only would apply if it's 4 feet by 4 feet. So one of the reasons we said it's invalid is because you don't see the schach. Will you see the schach if it's 8 feet by 9 feet? 8 feet by 8 feet, you don't see the schach. 9 feet by 9 feet, you're going to all of a sudden see 50 feet high? No, it's not going to make much of a difference. So that's not going to be the reason that would make this qualification logical. What about the other reason? Permanence. That a sukkah that's more than 20 amos high, you have to build it in a permanent way. And that's not valid. A sukkah that needs to be built in a permanent way is not a valid sukkah. So if it's more than 20 amos high, it's not valid. So here we say, well, if sukkah is more than 4 amos by 4 amos, meaning it's 9 feet by 9 feet, then you can make it very big. Would that make sense? That it's now doesn't need to be made in a permanent way? Could be, you could build it 50 amos high, 50 feet high, and it's still going to be a temporary sukkah? No. Just because you made it 9 feet, that makes it able to be handled, to be built in a temporary way? No, it's still going to have to be held down very strongly. Even though it's 9 feet by 9 feet, it's not 8 feet by 8 feet. So this qualification doesn't fit the reason of permanence. But what about shade? The other reason that we explained the Mishnah to fly 20 amos high is invalid is because the schach doesn't give shade all the way down to the bottom if it's 20 amos high. It's above 20 amos high. It won't give shade, any shade. But if you start making it bigger, then the shade will actually have an effect. Maybe not a huge effect, but it will have an effect below because you made it bigger. So now the shade that's much higher will have an effect. So according to this logic, we can explain it. Let's look at it inside. Kaman ki Reb Zera. Who does this go like? This goes like Reb Zera. The Amar Mishum Tzelhu. That he says the reason why a sukkah above 20 amos is invalid is because the bottom of the sukkah does not get any shade from the schach. V'kivan deravicha, since this is a wider sukkah, ika setzel sukkah, it is going to get some shade from the schach. Now the question is, really, it's going to get shade from the schach? You make it, all of a sudden, you made it 1 foot bigger, 9 feet by 9 feet sukkah. Now I'm going to make 100 feet high sukkah. That's 9 feet by 9 feet, but 100 feet high. And now that's going to get shade. What does the Gemara mean? So Taisus asked this question. He says, just because it has a little more than 8 by 8, all of a sudden you're going to get shade when you make it very high. So he says that no, you don't. The meaning of the Gemara is not that you can make it as high as you want. Everything is proportionate. A 4 by 4, a sukkah that's 4 amos by 4 amos, 8 feet by 8 feet, can go up to 20 amos high. You make it a little bigger, you can make it a little bigger that way. You make it very big, much bigger, you can make it much bigger that way. But each thing is proportionate. Up to, in other words, not that you can make it unlimited height. So this is the first answer of Taisvis. He says that it means proportionately, you need to get a little shade. So if you make it a little wider, you can make it a little higher. That's the first answer of Taisvis. The second answer of Taisvis is a little hard to understand. He says that the rabbis had a tradition. They had an understanding that no matter how high you make it, there's definitely going to be, if it's more than 8 feet by 8 feet, why? You will get some, even a tiny amount, but you will get some shade. And he says he compares it to eating on Yom Kippur. He says, the Gemara says that if you eat a big date on Yom Kippur, that's considered transgressing the prohibition of Yom Kippur. Because a big date has the ability to take a person out of the inui, be painting oneself, and you sort of are, you're not going to get full from it, but you are miyashev daita. Your mind is eased. Your mind is eased by eating a large date. The question over there is, what about if a guy the size of a giant, Oig Melech HaBashan, Oig, who was a giant, the king of Bashan, if he ate this little date, well, it's a big date, but for him, this is a tiny little date. He probably ate, what we eat as one meal. He probably ate 10 of those in order to satisfy himself. So how is one date going to satisfy a guy that size, Oig Melech HaBashan, when it comes to Yom Kippur, and we're going to consider him that he transgressed Yom Kippur because he ate one date? It's nothing for him. That's not satisfying him. That's not easing his mind. So he says over there that, yes, a regular person, a big date, it relaxes, it eases their mind a substantial amount. Doesn't fill them, but it eases their mind a substantial amount. Oig Melech HaBashan, if Oig would eat on Yom Kippur a koiseves, which is a large date, his mind will be eased a little bit. So there are certain things that, even though it's not going to be a lot, but it definitely makes a dent. this will make a dent, a small dent, but it'll make a dent in him that he's now eased. The drop has been eased. The drop of his hunger has been relaxed, it's been eased. And therefore, the same thing applies here. You have this huge sukkah. The height is huge. There's shade. If it's dalit al dalit, forget it. Anything more than that, it's giving something, a small amount. It's a tiny amount, but it's actually having an impact. It's having a minimal impact, but it's doing something. So that's what the rabbis understood. So these are the two answers of Taisus. One answer is a more logical answer that everything is proportionate, and the other answer of Taisus is that there's definitely all you need is a little bit, and once it's a little wider, so no matter how high you make it, you're gonna get a little more shade, and that's going to be a kosher sukkah according to this reason, and therefore, according to this, a sukkah that's more than dalit al dalit, it's more than 4 amos by 4 amos, more than 8 feet by 8 feet. That sukkah you could make even higher according to this reason, and it'll be a kosher sukkah according to everyone, not just Rabbi Yehuda in the Mishnah, but even the first opinion in the Mishnah will say it's kosher because it's definitely getting a little shade, or because proportionately it's going to get shade based on that proportion of dalit amos width allows 20 amos height. So maybe 10 amos width would allow 22 amos height, and so on and so forth. Proportionately, you would be allowed to make it higher and higher according to that proportion. Okay. And then the Gemara comes to a third qualification. Who does the following statement go like this? That Rab Chanan said, the son of Rav, in the name of Rav, Amar Rav. So it seems like all of these statements are people quoting Rav. And the statement goes as follows: the whole debate is when the sukkah can only handle the size of a person's head, majority of his body, and his table. That's the case. That's when there's a debate if you're allowed to have a tall sukkah.
Hello?
Of about 20 amas.
Wait a minute.
Aval, but machzekas yoister mikdei roishay v'rubay v'shulchanai. But if it could handle more than that, more than the majority of your body, your head, majority of your body, and your table, if it could handle more than that, afilu l'mayla mi'esr mama kshera, even it could even be taller than esr mama. So this is a little different than the previous statement. The previous statement said dalid amos is the cutoff. That if you have it bigger than dalid amos, than 4 amos, 4 cubits, bigger than that, which is like 8 feet by 8 feet, you have it bigger than that, then you're allowed to have a taller sukkah. Here it says it goes by 7 tefachim, 7 handbreadths, which is about 21 inches. That if it's bigger than 21 by 21, that's a tiny, tiny sukkah. Imagine a sukkah that's 21 inches by 21 inches. Just a picture of 2 doors. It's like a door by a door, you know, even that may be pushing it. So it's 21 inches by 21 inches. That's the size of a sukkah. You could fit the majority of your body, your head, majority of your body, and your table, which is 1 tefach by 1 tefach. That's a tiny little table. Yeah. And that would be the size.
That's the plumber.
I'm gonna go move the car. So give you a minute.
That would be the size of a minimum sukkah. And that sukkah you would have a limit of 20 amos high schach. But if you made your sukkah bigger than that, then you would be able to have a taller sukkah. It could be taller because you made it bigger, wider, and longer. You could then make it taller. So who would that go like? And the Gemara says that we can't fit with anyone. Kaman deloy kechad. It can't fit with anyone because the difference between a 21-inch sukkah and a 22-inch sukkah is not much. It's not going to make a difference in the shade. It's not going to make a difference in looking to the schach. It's not going to make a difference in permanence between 21 inches and 22 inches. Not going to do much. So therefore, he must have his own reason of why a sukkah that's 21 inches by 21 inches can only go 20 feet, 20 ames high. But a 22-inch sukkah by 22-inch sukkah, that you could go as high as you want. That would be, that must have his own, must have a different reason. We didn't see this reason. Now Tosfos is bothered with that. He says, what could the reason be? So he says, you know what the reason is? Some say because this is considered a chicken coop. That's the problem. A chicken coop is tall, is high up, and narrow. But if it would be bigger than that, it won't be a chicken coop. And then you could call it a sukkah. So Tosfos comes up with an explanation of maybe, so now we have 4 reasons why a sukkah above 20 amos is puzzle. We have the 3 reasons of our Gemara, and now we have the 4th the other qualification in the Gemara, which has to have its own reason because it doesn't fit with any of the other reasons. And there we have Tosfos' explanation that he brings to such an explanation that anything above 20 amos, if it's a tiny sukkah and it's above 20 amos, it's called a chicken coop. But if it's wider than that, then it's a sukkah. So you're fine. You can have it as tall as you want. But if it's a chicken coop, then it doesn't look like a sukkah. Okay, we're gonna stop here. Zygazund, everyone. Have a wonderful day.
Rabbi,
Thank you,
I just ask one question
Thank you,
here?
Rabbi.
Thank you, Rebbe.
Isaac.
Have a good day, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Isaac. Thank you.
My question was why the Tanayim and Amoraim didn't have a concept. They didn't have a concept of proportionality and save Tosfos from all his analysis in that regard. No, seriously.
So the thing is that we're just walking around in darkness. They might have said different things, but we don't have all the details. And we also, the smarter you are, the less you need to explain. So we are walking around in darkness and trying to figure out what they meant, because they were brilliant and we are simple. And so we're getting a little taste, now we understand them a little better. Now, after learning this for many times, now I finally understand, a little more of what they meant. You live and learn, experience. And so we, Baruch Hashem, after learning it a few times, you sometimes come up with a little better understanding. And so that's why they didn't spell everything out, because it's almost like as you get older, you don't spell every detail out to your children, to your spouse. You sort of they start catching on. So but the problem is the future generations don't always know. They don't know the details. My
The underlying.
all right, Zygazont. Have a great day.
Zygazund.